support. Curtis Fleming is there on the edge of the area. Fleming for Craig Hignett. Hit it, Higgy. Higgy hits the treble!
Avenelli coming alive again. Juninho wants the ball played to him. Avenelli spots out Emerson!
Hello and welcome to the Boro Breakdown podcast with Jonny, Tom and Matt. We are the Boro podcast that gives you all the Boro match day chatter in a podcast. And well, it's another defeat for Boro. 7 defeats in 10 seasons, going 9th in the championship table. 5 points off the places. I'm still not saying the word. So as always, guys, one key takeout. Tom, would you like to go first?
Just bored at the moment of this team and have been for quite some time. I was thinking ahead to this podcast and I was just like, I can't be bothered because we talk about the same thing week in, week out at the moment. And it's, the sheer deficiencies with Boro where, we're going backwards. I did think it was quite funny that, like, after a couple of wins, some optimism was coming back, and then in typical Boro style, just pull the rug from under us with that type of performance, because that was horrific yesterday. Like, it was said on the radio after the match, Swansea weren't particularly good either, and I do agree with that, but then they didn't need to be very good to beat us yesterday. We were absolutely horrendous, and there's no excuse for that type of performance.
So you really feel, Tom? But no, I echo those thoughts. To be honest, I thought we were really poor yesterday. I think my key takeout is just sadness. To be honest, it's a sad state of affairs of how Boro have threw this season away, something that was in their grasp, and it could have been and should have been a very, very good season for Boro. But unfortunately, we've been unlucky with injuries. Hindsight's a beautiful thing, of course. We'll come on to that a little bit later on around Boro's injury crisis at the back. And losing key players, losing those key moments. And it's all spiraled into this sad state of affair of being ninth. And, there's a lot of fans yesterday who went to Swansea, getting up at 3 a.m. and seeing a poor performance. The players as well, they have a lot of pressure on their shoulders to pull out results, and I think that pressure just got to them now, and it's very difficult for them to show confidence on the pitch, but you only get confidence by winning football matches, unfortunately, and I just think with the run of games, the lack of changes that the team are trying to make and only playing one-dimensional is unfortunately Boro's Achilles heel, and yeah, I'm just a bit sad now. I've passed caring it. It's just like, well, it's kind of like that old family dog in it, it's just put us out of our misery and start again in the summer where optimism will be high once again. But Matt, what's your one key takeout?
Yeah, pretty similar to the pair of you. If there was an end to sim button, I think I've mentioned this before, I'd press it. I'd press it instantly. I just want the season over now, and I just want us to be part of our misery. I'm sick of being dragged into a slight degree of optimism, only for it to be pulled away from us with a performance that, let's not make any mistake, was just as bad as the performances that we saw in the rut we were just in. I'm just sick of this endless cycle that the Boro have been stuck in all season. I mean, I wouldn't say I was by any means optimistic or jumping to book my hotel for Wembley after the Stoke and Derby wins at all, but I was hopeful that we'd stopped the rot and it began to turn some sort of a corner ahead of a spell of really, crucial winnable games as well, where you could sort of start to see a route for Boro to get back into the playoffs. But we reverted back to type yesterday, and it just leaves you wondering, and I know it's easy to say this in hindsight, but how much of them last 2 wins were down to Boro actually being better, or maybe the 2 teams we played just being absolutely god-awful and just happening to drop in front of us at the perfect time. But yeah, just past the point of frustration, apathetic, sick, annoyed. I could go on. It's just annoying that we keep waiting for Boro to click. We keep waiting for them to put a run together and start to show their true potential. We've been saying this for nearly 4 months. It's been 4 months, near enough, since that slight run in November where we actually began to look good. And since then, it's just been a cycle of this same thing over and over again. So I honestly do believe it's sink or swim for the next 2 or 3 games now. I think up to the international break and maybe the Oxford game, we need to win all 3 to give ourselves any sort of a chance. And even then, I'm extremely guarded on this team doing anything this season, because here we are saying the same things we've been saying for 4 months now.
Yeah, it definitely could be a bit of a rerun every single episode that we've had. You know, it's a quite a difficult moment for Boro. But let's talk about the Swansea game, because Tom, you said it was probably one of the worst performances of the season. You weren't too happy with it. I'd love for you to dissect that a little bit more of why you thought that was one of the worst performances of the season.
It just wasn't very good, was it? I mean, in a nutshell. No, it just... I was watching it and I was just like this. I mean, to go to Matt's point as well of how much of it was Boro being better than the other teams, I did think we'd improved in the last couple of games. But then we seem to have a habit in this team of, like, when we finally look like we're getting back on track, we'll drop an absolute clanger like we did yesterday and just play extremely poorly. And that's what it was for me yesterday. Like the first half, I don't remember us being in their half that much, at all. I remember the majority of it being in our half. There was a couple of times where we're breaking on the counter attack, like Azaz storming forward, same with Whittaker, and either they don't have options because no one's moving with them, or they pick the wrong ball. And I just, compared to the last 2 performances, that wouldn't have happened in either two. We just got no consistency in this type of thing, and I think that's where it kind of really shows for Boro in those situations, because, like I said, Swansea weren't particularly great anyway, either. Sorry, so I mean, great finish for their goal. Don't want to kind of take anything away from that. There was nothing Travers could do to save that. But how was he getting in that position anyway to have an unchallenged shot from 20, 25 yards out, whatever it was? It was, us making sloppy mistakes, giving the ball back to them at that point, going forward. It was extremely sloppy in the passing again, just when it looked like we'd sorted that out for the last couple of games. And like I said, this team has no consistency. And I don't understand how, when you're finally kind of back on the right track, you can go and do a complete 180 and play like we did yesterday. Not that the 2 performances before were absolutely great, but there were at least signs to be positive there before this game. Now there isn't. And we're back to square one in terms of, where's this team going? And if anything, I think at least those last 2 performances have bought Carrick a little bit of time and a little bit, taken the heat off a little bit from the fans, because if we didn't get those 2 results and then we played like we did yesterday, you can imagine what people would be saying at the moment. I feel like those 2 results really kind of took the heat off for at least a week. But if we do the same next week in the 2 games we've got, I think we're going to be right back to where we were as well.
Yeah, and you're looking at mid-table. You're looking at potentially going down the bottom half of the table as well, and that is a massive failure for Middlesbrough if they do end up there. They have to be in and around the playoffs, and we said at the start of the season that playoffs were the minimum, and they have to get there. I've always said 6th position for Boro, but now the more this season progresses, it's like slowly but surely just falling away. Those incremental 1% are just going by, and Middlesbrough slowly going to about 10th position. But Matt, another goal yesterday, forced a Middlesbrough mistake, of course. Why do you think this keeps happening to Boro? Why do you think it's such a hallmark of Middlesbrough's team?
I think that, well, firstly, I don't think we're good enough to play this way consistently. I think when teams sit off us a bit like what Stoke and Derby did, give us the time to play, give us the space to play, I think, we can we can pull them teams apart and really show what we're capable of. But I think it only takes, and we talk about this Boro team being in a sweet spot, I think we need to play at a certain tempo and we need key players to be on it for our style of play to click and for it to really work. I think a couple of things, a couple of little disruptions to our play, and the whole thing falls down like Jenga blocks. All Swansea had to do yesterday was press our midfield hard, press our attacking players, do the opposite of what Stoke and Derby did, basically, and it just put us under pressure and we simply couldn't handle it. Hackney and Morris really struggled under that pressure. They were both desperately poor yesterday in possession, really, really sloppy. I mean, the whole team was, but we need them key midfielders to, progress the play through the thirds, and they were just getting swarmed and they couldn't cope. And on top of that, our attacking four, I mean, I find it, Tom was talking about the inconsistencies of this team. I do find it so frustrating and crazy that the same front four that we saw at Stoke, we finally saw a front four where we thought, okay, this is clicking now. We've found a formula to get through this. And we saw it sort of work again against Derby. We found a way. We were still rather creative in that game. But yesterday, it was like Jekyll and Hyde. Whittaker, miles off it, had a really, really poor game. Azaz, again, without him on song, the whole thing falls apart. And then you look at the options we've got. It's just so easy for Boro to fall out of that sweet spot, and it allows teams to just force us into errors. And we've seen it so often. We saw it at Leeds. We saw it countless times when Boro turn over the ball in them areas. We're so exposed on the transition, on the turnover. And all it took was one moment of quality from Swansea yesterday to punish us. And I think the most frustrating thing on top of that is that even if we did make that mistake and we did go behind, we never looked for 1 second like we were going to turn things around. There wasn't a change off the bench. There wasn't a change in system, a change in style, or anything tactically that made me believe we were ever going to get back into that game yesterday. So once you knock Boro out of that sweet spot, yeah, we're susceptible to just dropping a clanger and falling apart like we did yesterday. And although Swansea weren't great, they were far from great, I think they got their press right, and they stopped our key players from playing. And once you've done that, Boro's attack is nullified, and we see what happened yesterday, and we've seen it so often this season.
Yeah, and look, with possession-based teams as well, you tend to find that disrupting rhythm is a really big thing to essentially beat them. You want to stop them from getting those short, intricate passes together, trying to break the lines, knock the ball out, hit them a couple of times, really disrupt things, and then they do look, lack of ideas, to be honest. And Matt just alluded to it there around Boro's front four. And we were slightly praising it over the last couple of games. It looked that things were slowly starting to work. Things were clicking between the front four. But in that first half yesterday, Boro really couldn't get going. They had 60+% possession, but it really didn't amount to much. But what do you think was going wrong going forward for Boro?
I just think wrong choice of pass, bad decision making a lot of the time. As I mentioned earlier, I do remember examples of, say, Azaz or Whittaker or Hackney breaking out on the counter attack, and we're looking for a pass. And I mean, there was an example in the second half for that is coming to mind for me, where the ball was blatantly to Willen Jr. and he had the most space he would have been able to get a cross in. But I think it might have been Azaz. He just tried to force a ball into Conway, and Conway had nowhere to go and nowhere to run onto it. And it happened a couple of times in the first half as well. Ryan Giles was left kind of just stood there on the left-hand side, unmarked, and we've tried to force the ball through the middle. And you just look at it and you're just like, if we can all see what the obvious ball is there, why aren't these players seeing it? And, why are we trying to kind of overcomplicate things by forcing balls through narrow gaps, to Tommy Conway? I can obviously understand trying to get the ball to Conway in the box, but you're trying very, very risky passes in terms of, giving possession away. And there's never really much chance of them coming off. And I found that in the first half, and it continued on in the second half as well. Although I think in the early part of the second half, it might have been a little bit better. But you know, that game's all kind of blending into one for me now. So it might not have been. It was all horrendous, to be fair. But for me, yeah, it's bad decision making, and it's not something that I can say I've seen from that front four in the last couple of games, or even from the midfielders as well. I think it was just a completely different performance than the last couple of games, and yeah, no idea why.
Yeah, and when you're looking at the players that we have as well, there is a versatility there, but I sometimes think that you have to try and play to their strengths a little bit. If things aren't going right, try and chop up your play. And by doing that, you do hopefully disrupt things for an opposition team who are trying to play in a certain way against you. And Matt, you alluded to it a moment ago, just around that aggressive press. And Swansea yesterday, they really did try and play that man marking press yesterday, especially when Boro were in possession. And when they were trying to build up from the back, they were going man for man. And when we are doing that, I think it's so important that you do try and mix it up a little bit. And if you need to go along, you go along. And if you do go along with the players that we have, you want to knock it into the channels, get him on a foot race. Tommy Conway's got a bit of pace about him. Whitaker's relatively quite quick. You have options on the bench, like the likes of Delano, Bergs, Organelli Jr., who do have a bit of pace about them as well, who can really start to chase those fullbacks down. But Middlesbrough's goal, Swansea's goal yesterday, the one that conceded, and we alluded to it a little bit earlier on around just one build up and then two individual mistakes. And I think Swansea's goal was the epitome of both of them, really. And their goal came from Middlesbrough's free kick themselves. Morris got fouled, he puts hand on the ball, and then he looks to play it back to Mark Travers. And with Travers here, I think when he gets the ball, you'll notice that when a keeper gets the ball now in a possession-based team, you tend to see the centre-back split out, and also you're able to start build up properly. We don't really do that, but I think it's really important that we do hold the ball at this moment, because if he does hold up the ball, Boro can get into a better shape. And when they get into a better shape, that means more options are available and you're able to knock the ball in any direction that you want to. But we don't. He holds on to it and passes to Neto Borges. And by passing to Borges, it recycles that press, which Swansea want us to do. And they've got triggers on certain players. When they get the ball, they'll want to trigger Middlesbrough in possession. And when we do have it in a certain situation where we're trying to pass to Borges, it goes to Dale Fry and it goes to Morris and then comes out to Dijksteel. Dale Fry at this point is pointing at Morgan Whitaker and saying, right, get out wide or knock it long. Try and get out of a place where Middlesbrough can really start to play out from. And we don't really, to some aspect of it, we don't really play out of it. One thing I would say about Morris here is when he does get the ball, 5 Swansea players really swarm him. So his only real pass is actually back to Dijksteel. And Dijksteel will play it back to Dale Fry in the corner of the pitch. And by doing that, I actually think Dale Fry's pass at this point in that build-up phase is actually really, really good. He breaks the lines, he gets it to Azaz, and you think, right, okay, well, Boro can actually play out at this point. You've broke the first line of defense. Azaz is in a really good position. You've broke the lines. Giles is well out on the left-hand side, well out of position. Well, not out of position, but he's in a really strong position where if Middlesbrough do switch it, they're actually well out of it. But when Azaz gets the ball, his body's facing Whitaker, essentially. So you can only really play it one way. And by doing that, I think Whitaker has a couple of options, and he's also tied up a little bit to some aspect. But he does get the ball, and when he does get it, there's a part of the pitch that opens up. So he has 2 options here. You either play it first time, you try and get it to Azaz, or you play the ball around the corner to Force, and then he plays off to Hackney, because Hackney's making that darting run as well. It's a poor pass from Whitaker. He doesn't actually get the ball to his feet. He actually hits it first time. He absolutely spoons it. And Marcus Force actually isn't reading the play. He's caught on his heels. Harry Darling wins it. And then they're on the transition on Boro. And then at this point, where Eom's running through, Hayden Hackney should just take him down. He's 30 yards out. You're going to get a yellow card. And they're hopefully you're not going to score from 30 yards out. But what it's all came from is Boro not building up correctly, wrong individual errors, players getting caught on the transition. And on top of that as well, their press was really strong in that man marking system. Boro couldn't really plough. But when people do that, movement's really vital, and how you utilize your goalkeeper in possession football, I think can really start to open different angles and get you out playing more effectively. But Boro didn't do it, and they conceded a goal from their own individual error again. And, you can blame Whitaker a lot and say, well, it is bad pass, but realistically, from the very beginning, if you built up more effectively and correctly, then that might not have happened. But also on top of that, knowing when to play out and knowing when to hit it long and do something a little bit different should have been on Boro's mind. If a team is playing really aggressive, you've got to chop and change it, take the pressure off. But how many times have I said that over recent weeks? Wanting to create different angles, wanting to change things ever so slightly and try and play at your striker strengths. We do have pace up front with Conway. He's not, like a laugh pace, but at least he can cause some errors against those centre-backs as well. But, their strike, really good effort, but there is chances there where you can take him down. There's force being on his heels. There's so much which I don't like about the goal, but when you do play that specific way, you are prone to it, and you're expansive and you're exposed. And when things don't go right, it's not particularly great. And just one final thing before we talk about the double change at halftime is how Hackney and Morris are playing at the moment. It was time and time again, they're level with each other. One has to be deeper. One has to play a bit more offensive. By doing that, it creates a bit of an S shape and it gets you out of positions where you can play out more effectively with a bit more freedom. Sometimes when you're too stuck together, that really limits that play out from the back, and you've got to really adjust things now. But let's talk about this double change at halftime, because Force and Giles came off and Kelechi Iheanacho and Ellen Jr. came on. Matt, I just want to quickly touch on Ryan Giles, because a lot was said about him coming back to the football club. He has had a couple of difficult spells at Luton and Hull. It just hasn't really got going from yet, has it?
No, it hasn't. It's a shame in a way, because I think he is a player who really wants to be here. He really wants to do well, but I think his confidence is absolutely shot. And the red flags were there to see with just the 18 months he's had pretty much since he left Boro. The Luton move didn't work out. I don't begrudge him for that move at all, but it didn't make any sense with him going to a team who were going to spend 80% of their time in the Premier League defending. And then the whole move hasn't worked either. He had 3 different managers there. So it's not been easy for him. But I remember when rumours of the move were starting to emerge, I felt very, very wary of the move. I get Michael Carrick has desperately wanted him back for a long, long time. And I could see the offensive benefits as to why that would maybe help Boro. Maybe breaking down a low block or just giving us that little bit of extra width and that, extra threat on the left-hand side. But I think when it comes to second spells, I'm always incredibly cautious, because the expectancy is raised slightly. People expect maybe not exactly a full replication of what he did before, but they expect to see some elements of that. And he's just been absolutely miles off it. I think with Giles, we were relying on his attacking output justifying the signing and justifying why we've brought him in, because essentially, if you step back, we were bringing a defender into a team who couldn't really defend, and he's a defender who isn't the best defensively. So we were really relying on that side of his game, overriding his defensive shortcomings, and it's just not happened for him. I think there have been moments where the Sunderland own goal, for example, just unfortunate, and that would have just knocked him down a peg or two with his confidence as well. So I think there have been a few things that have happened to him that have been a little bit unfortunate that haven't helped. But at the same time, yeah, he needed to hit the ground running quickly, and he hasn't. And I remember at the time being sceptical of Boro not having an obligation. But if there was one positive to come out of a January window that, let's be honest, has for the most part been a bit of a disaster, even though the Giles signing, you can say what you want about it, I am very grateful that the club protected themselves with it only being a loan and have gave themselves that option of, well, if it doesn't work, we don't have to commit to this signing, because unless he has a an unbelievable final few games of the season, it's just going to be a second spell that hasn't really worked. So I'm gutted for him. I really do believe he wants to do well here, but he's an out-of-form player who's joined an out-of-form team, and unless things turn around quickly, it is going to be a second spell that unfortunately has just not worked out for either party.
Yeah, and I'd echo that as well. He's definitely a player with low in confidence, and the whole group is. And, you know, when Ellen Jr. came on at half-time, I thought Giles is miles off what Ellen Jr. could be. And I really like Ellen Jr. when he was at Juventus. I thought he was brilliant in that left wing back role. He really helped that team get up the pitch and press well, and really good at build up as well, which I thought coming here, it's a little bit different. The game in Serie A is a little bit slower, but more tactical, I would say, if I'm watching game side by side. And I thought Ellen Jr. yesterday, his recovery runs were very, very good. He didn't have any individual errors in defensive part of his game. And going forward, you could see that he was willing to get down the line, knock a ball in the box. And it was a lovely ball across for Iniacho, but Iniacho was just in the wrong position. And you thought, okay, that is something that we can definitely look to utilise. And with Ellen Jr., he's got pace. He's good on the ball when he was yesterday, and last couple of games he hasn't been particularly great. But I think when you play someone in their natural position, and when Boro playing with that 3 and playing with more of a wing back on that left hand side, I think that suits him. It's that position where it's familiarity with him, and he could play at this level comfortably. And let's see him have a run of games now where he's in that position for the next few, and see how he goes. And I don't think he's a bad player by any means. And I think he can be a very, very good player. It's just, he's again came into a side that hasn't been great in terms of form. Bologna haven't been doing particularly amazing this season. He did find it difficult to get in and out the squad as well. So there's a lot that can go on, but I thought his performance yesterday was good. And I think that it's probably warranted him a start in the next game against QPR. But I want to chat about Boro's defensive record again, because Dale Fry went off injured yesterday. So Boro technically have no fit centre backs, senior fit centre backs left now. Tom, a lot was mentioned online this week around how frequently this seems to be happening. It is a massive worry, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, me and you were talking about it the other day about our injury record and like what must be happening to cause it. I feel like we possibly do need to look at like training and sports science as to what's going on. When that injury happened yesterday, and on BBC Tees, I think Maddo had spotted it on the monitor and said, Dil Fry said, I haven't pulled it, it's just tight. And, it indicates another muscular injury, but it seems to be happening to our defenders a lot. We've had, I don't know what specifically was wrong with Dieng. I've heard Achilles, I've heard knee. If it was Achilles, 4 Achilles injuries within the last season. Tommy Smith, Darrell Lenihan, Senny Dieng, and oh god, who else am I missing here? Bangura. So you've got that amount of injuries going on, and it's with the Achilles injuries, I think it's very unlikely that any of those were contact, given what the Achilles tendon is, and we seem to be picking up these muscular injuries as well fairly consistently, and I'm just like, what are we doing in training? And Jonny, I know you've got some points like as well, which could be contributing factors to why this would be happening so often, and I do agree with the thinking behind them as well, because it could absolutely be that, if you want to kind of like elaborate on them. But I think we must be doing something in training to increase the amount of stress that these players have on the muscles and make them a lot more susceptible to injury. because you look at how other managers have set up, not set up, sorry, how other managers have managed the team and managed training and stuff in previous years. When have we ever had an injury record like we have now? Like, you look at, say, for example, when Karanka took us up, how many serious injuries did we have through that season? Because I can't think of many. I can think of quite a few who pushed through the pain because they wanted to play and be a part of that. And I'm not saying our players haven't, because, Coburn played with a hernia for God knows how long last season. But, I don't think it's a desire thing from the players, but I think there's ways of managing training so that you don't pick up these injuries, or, manage them from a, medical standpoint, that you don't pick up these injuries. And I don't think I think we must not be doing something right at the moment to be having the kind of injury crisis that we have.
Yeah, look, there's a lot to it. I think to elaborate on my points, there's so many internal and external problems, and or things that can really build up to injuries being, happening really. And probably speaking from experience of the injuries I've had when I play football, Tom and Matt, you're both laughing at me.
Or done anything else, Jonny?
Done anything? Yeah, jiu-jitsu. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So stop doing martial arts and stop doing.
You made a biscuits, mate.
Made a biscuits, yeah. But when I did my knee, and when I've done my tendons, when I've done my cruciate, when I've brought my nose, when I've brought my hands, yeah, it's just a big skeleton cast. Look, there's so much that can go into it, right? And when you're recovering from injuries, it's difficult because you sometimes can put strains on different muscles and tendons whilst you're recovering from something else. So there is that. But on top of that too, it can be things that a player's getting enough sleep, a player's eating correctly, they're going on the piss a lot, like because some can do behind closed doors. There's diet stuff, there's travel, there's the way that you can train, what boots you wear as well, because how football boots are molded now, you don't really get that pressure or support in the back of the ankle as much as what old boots would. Do a lot more firmer. These boots would allow for more flexibility, and by doing that, you're able to roll the joint or tendons a little bit more.
What you're saying is we all need to go back to wearing total 90s, I think, Jonny.
Total 90s.
Just bring them back.
Black copper boots, and they were the real boots, the classics. But look, with that as well, though, if you look at the women's game, the amount of ACL injuries that they have because of the boots that they wear is a big problem. And clubs can have partnerships with boot companies. Players have deals as well where they have to wear specific boots to advertise them. And that can play a huge part in how you place your foot on the ground, how you can move, and all that kind of stuff. But there is a lot of stuff that can go into it, and it might not just be training. It might be so many different things. And I mean, there's stuff in the game which can give you more enhancing performance than other teams can, and you're told to go home at certain parts of the day when someone turns up. Not saying that teams do it, but it happens. The game is not as clean as you probably think it is. So there's so much that goes into it. I agree that you have to look at training. You have to look at what they're wearing in terms of boots. Lifestyle's a big thing. And, I would see what Boro have done to upgrade things or downgrade the facilities as well. So there's so much that can go into it, to be honest. But you just can never pinpoint it to one sole thing, unfortunately. But I'm all for an external team coming into the training ground or to the club and saying, we actually think this, getting some consultants in and maybe going away from Boro's current, sports science team and just getting an extra opinion. I think that might potentially help. But look, I ain't that right person to say that. I just think that is what we could look at. But out of all of the injury crises that we've had, Middlesbrough have been linked with 36-year-old Eric Peters, who was a free agent. Of course, the experienced defender has been training with the club at the moment. What are your thoughts on the signing?
Well, I can't say and pretend I was jumping from the lampshades when I saw it drop. The rumours drop yesterday. I think it's just a damning indictment of the situation we find ourselves in. It's almost on the level of Jonathan Woodgate saying the table's lying. That infamous quote. I feel like the quote Carrick said in that press conference when Craig Johns, I think it was, asked him, we've sold Matt Clark, are we going to replace him? And he gave that sort of, it's fine, everything's fine. That is not going to be forgotten. And I always thought, and I never quite understood why Boro left themselves so short with only 3 fit centre halves, none of which have got impressive fitness records. So I think it's a down indictment of the desperate situation we find ourselves in. And Eric Peters, I think that when I had a look, he's not played a competitive full 90 minutes in over a year. I think he played maybe, it was just under a year ago since his last senior appearance in the Championship. So it's just a desperate, reach and hope that he can just plug a gap and bring some form of solidity to our defence. I mean, any player who puts on the Boro shirt, I'll get right behind, and I'll hope and pray he does well. But I wouldn't say it's a signing that particularly excites me in any way, shape, or form. I think it's just a desperate attempt to fill in this, the gap and paper over this really desperate injury crisis we find ourselves in at the back. So if he comes in, I hope he impacts the team in a positive sort of way. But as I say, I'm at the point in the season now where I'm so sort of apathetic towards it all. Meh. We'll see what happens. Maybe he'll score the winner in the playoff final and go down as a hero. Who knows?
Sign him on. Register Woodgate and just have those two at centre back, bringing our average age of the team up. I think that's we're not far away from that.
I was going to say, did they play together at Stoke? Maybe, or have I missed? No, I don't think they have. I think it was Woodgate came to Boro as he was signing for Stoke, I think. But I mean, yeah, bring the average age up. Bit of experience. See how that goes. But I mean, we have no centre backs now, right? So that's quite a difficult one for Boro. You've got 2 kids in Harley Hunt, I think, who I think's actually injured himself, and Woolston as well, who came on the bench yesterday. So you're basically just screwed at this point. But Nettle Borges has played quite well in the last game, so at least we've got Nettle, and we haven't got much else. But anyway, let's move on. Let's move on to podcast questions. Yes, podcast questions. Every week you get the chance to ask us a question via email, theborobreakdown@hotmail.com, tweet us at the Boro Breakdown, and also just find a way to message us by owl, by pigeon, by anything. You'll find us somewhere, somehow. But the first question this week is from Paul, and he asks, is the hype around our recruitment model dispelled after seeing the performances of our January signings, the rash sale of Matt Clark, and having 3 players out on loan that can't get a start in League One? Tom, do you want to take this one?
I can when, I'm not right-clicking on the mute button. So I think we need to be fair because we've given the new recruitment model a lot of praise and stuff on this podcast, but I think we need to be fair in the criticism that we need to give it as well. January, and to be fair, I think this has been said, January was not a good window for us. I think, the sale of Matt Clark, could it have been avoided? Possibly, but you'd have still had an unhappy player here at the club till the end of the season. I personally think we should have replaced Matt Clark. I've not heard a reason why, other than Carrick saying in that press conference, "Now we'll be fine." Famous last words. Having 3 players out on loan that can't get a start in League One. I'm assuming that's Silvera, Hamilton. Who's the other one?
Alex Gilbert.
I thought Gilbert was starting. I thought he was doing quite well at Charlton.
He hasn't been starting, but every game that he's played, he's pretty much had an assist. He's got 3 assists at the moment. I think all 3 of them are corners, though, from the same corner, which is just
right. So at least we've got a
anyway.
corner taker when he comes back. But no, I don't think it was a good window for us at all. The sale of Latte Laugh, again, could we have dragged that out till the end of the season? Possibly, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes to kind of lead to that sale. We did obviously need to make a big sale. And, you know, in general, I am still a fan of this recruitment model because, as frustrating as it is now, we're making these big sales, it seems like, every season and kind of keeping the club going. The alternative to that is going in cycles where every 3 years we get a Woodgate season where we're told we're going to be ambitious and stuff. Then we sign 3 players from League One and, a backup goalkeeper and that's it. And then, we don't need to talk about what else happened that season because of how horrific it was. But this stops us being in a cycle where, we'll push 1 year and then, not push as much the next year and then, completely pull back the year after. So in that respect, I still think it's the right recruitment model to have. And we've had some good windows under this recruitment model, but we can't class January as a good window under it because, selling like their laugh, bringing in Iheanacho on the last day. Giles was always going to happen. It seemed like for the last few windows, and I can understand why we've got him back based on his form the first time and based on the issues we've been having at left back. But then we still brought in an out-of-form player to an out-of-form team, and he's not exactly going to be in an ideal position to build up confidence here. Whittaker as a kind of replacement for Jones, fair enough, but again, we're bringing in an out-of-form player and an out-of-form team, and we're probably a little bit far away from seeing the best from Whittaker or how he's going to bring the best out of other players in this team. So, well, obviously the team form's not contributed well to the transfer window either, but yeah, it wasn't a good one. I think there is some very fair criticism to be had around the recruitment team in January, but that's not to say, this is terrible, let's rip it all up now. They've done well previously, but this one hasn't been a good one. So we just need to wait and see what happens in the summer now, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the recruitment team it's had a bit of a poor one as well. You also don't know what's available, and that window can be quite difficult. I think for some players that don't want to become available, prices become more inflated, and you do have a pool of players that you maybe not would normally go for. And to replace Jones with Whittaker is 2 different profiles completely. I said that in his lowdown, and that isn't the right probable fit. The right back position was one that we were desperate for, and we didn't get it. So I don't know if someone wasn't available or what, but ideally I would have loved us to address it. Midfield again, and then on top of that as well, centre back. I think, yeah, I agree with Matt, not Matt, Tom, Matt, Tom, Steve, Dave. Just on the getting the right player in if we needed to. But it's been a poor window for Boro. It's been a really poor window, and with Whittaker, you could come good. I think as Ilan Jr. is a good talent, but hasn't hit the level that we wanted him to hit yet. And Iheanacho is a player, like I said in the last podcast, if you're getting beat, you probably don't want him on the pitch. And when we're winning, you can look quite good. So there's a lot of things to pick apart. But I agree with you, Tom. I don't think that one bad window can tell a whole recruitment team that it's a bad recruitment team. Every team has it. No one's perfect, and you can't always progress every single window. But maybe what I would like to see is, get rid of that January window once in a while. That might actually help things to some aspect of it. You don't have to put too much pressure on going last minute and getting yourself over the line for some January signings. But in terms of a laugh I've seen on Twitter and Blue Sky yesterday, some of the Atlanta fans weren't happy with him and calling him rubbish. So, there you go. Everyone's rubbish. in football. So let's move on. The next question, though, Matt, I'll come to you. It's from Guy Bailey on Blue Sky, and he asks, what has been the worst decision we've made this season? It's a stat category. So what was the worst decision been?
How long have you got? I mean, there's so many things you could go into. That's just been. I mean, there's so many things that have been bad that have cost us, like home form, defense, individual errors, in-game management, tactical stuff. I mean, to nail it down to one specific decision is so difficult. I think I'd say maybe not selling Latilaf, because I stand by the idea that it's an offer that a club like us can't turn down, and the money was outstanding and fantastic, and Boro are just needing to sell that big player, to allow us to be competitive. As Tom mentioned, we are more consistently competitive every season financially. So I think long term that decision was fine, but maybe the timing of it was probably the worst decision we've made, and maybe replacing him with Iheanacho, because I believe, and I know again it's easy to say in hindsight with the run we've just been on and how many defeats we had in February. I'm not saying it was all down to Latilaf not being there, but had we had Latilaf in that team, or even a replacement that was more in the similar profile as Latilaf, who could offer us similar strengths to Latilaf, with the pace he offered us, how well he was, holding the ball up, how much of a nuisance he was for centre halves. I think Iheanacho is such a different profile of player, and he come in and he was so unfit. And it's not his fault that we've brought him in and he's as unfit as he was, and we expected him to just chuck him in and hit the ground running. It was just never realistic to expect that of a player. I think his minutes equated to around 9 games of football up until the point he joined Boro this season. So it was unrealistic for us to expect him to have any sort of impact instantly and to offer us anything like Latilaf did. But I think not replacing him with a player who at least would offer us something similar, who was more likely to hit the ground running, I think was the biggest mistake we've made. Because if Conway's not firing or Azaz isn't firing, and they weren't in that spell, you're looking at alternatives and who we can turn to, and there was just nothing there. And I think without Lath and Dork, we have lacked pace, we've lacked width, them key elements that I think could really bail us out at times. We just didn't have them in the team. So I'd say not selling Lath, but the timing of it, and that then leading to who we replaced him with, was the biggest mistake we've made. And of course, us not replacing Matt Clark as well, because could we have foreseen having all of our defenders out so quickly? Probably not. But still, it could have gave us at least that one extra body to just help us tick over. So yeah, nail it down to one. I don't know if you guys have got an answer to that either. It's so difficult to nail it down to one thing.
Yeah, look, there's so much, isn't there, that you can nail it down to. I think it's not just solid decisions; it's just things that haven't always gone the way. Like, look at Ben Dork now, out for the rest of the season, and you can't really get the right person to equate what he delivered, and you can't find that in the market. So it's not a bad decision. It's just things that haven't gone your way. There's injuries that sometimes you can't account for, players that might go unexpectedly, which you can't really account for. But as part of a club, you have to be really prepared in all of those situations. But some situations you just can't really plan for. And I think that can really spiral into different things. One, I would say, not a decision, but I would say an overview or a point, or I don't really know what the best words for it is, just that I think that, what's the best way to put it? I think we have overestimated what the squad is. I've always said 6th is a kind of a good placement for where Boro are. But when you look at Boro's quality from our best players to our lowest quality players, there's a big gap, I would say. We're still so inconsistent. We have players that are low championship level, and we have some players that are very top who could probably play in the Premier League tomorrow. And that in itself has a bit of a balance problem. And I think with Lath going now, I think that maybe we should be where we should be. And that might have, I don't know, maybe with Carrick's management and what we've done over the last 2 seasons, that all added up into one thing. might be a decision where fans might go, actually, we probably over-egged it, but I'm not too sure. But Tom, I don't know what your thoughts are. Have you got one for one of the worst decisions?
Worst decision this season was me saying, "Yeah, I'll renew my season ticket." I'm just joking on that one, but yeah, Riverside hasn't been a happy place to go to. But no, I think there's a lot to mention. Personally, for me, I'd love to say not getting another defender in January, but then the other side of that is prices go up in January, and I also don't want the club getting absolutely ripped off by people for centre backs. So, yeah, it's an awkward position we're being left in, but I'd still rather we didn't overpay for someone and we kept on the right track for our transfer strategy. So, yeah, there's a lot of things where I'm just kind of like, if it was that easy, I'd just blame this one thing, but then you've got to think of all the context behind it. And I think, as well as them potentially being bad decisions, maybe just the cards haven't fallen right for us in at certain times this season.
Right, so the final question then, it's from Martin. And Tom, I think you might be the best person to answer this one, to be honest. So Martin's asked, is it wrong that I just want the season to be over? I can't really be asked with putting up with this until the end of the season. I said I wanted the end of the season. Matt, you said it. And Tom, I think you've said it. So is Martin wrong for thinking that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, personally, what I would like to do is just renew my season ticket and then forget about it till August and be like, right, be back then, try again next time. But yeah, I'm in exactly the same boat at the moment. I'm looking at the remaining games of this season, and I'm like, we're just going to be in the same position we were last season, where there's nothing to play for, and then just some dislikable clubs in the playoff places, which I'll probably just ignore the playoff games this season, and yeah, I'll just be back in August.
Yeah, fair enough. But let's move on. Let's move on to my favourite part of the show now, and it is trivia time. And guys, I've went with another "Who am I?" type of question. And there's a player who is currently playing in Las Vegas, and his first season in English football was for QPR. He was signed by Tony Mowbray and spent 3 years on Teesside. And he's also had spells at Walsall, Rotherham, Brighton, and Brentford. And, well, guys, get your notepads at the ready, because you have 30 seconds to identify who this player was. So I'll repeat it again. So he's currently playing in Las Vegas. His first season in English football was for QPR, and he was signed by Tony Mowbray and spent 3 years on Teesside. And he's also had spells at Rotherham, Walsall, Brighton, and Brentford. And your timer starts now. Time is up, gents. Now, answers. So I'll repeat the question for one final time. So I'm currently playing Las Vegas. My first season was in English football. Get my teeth back in. Was for QPR. He was signed by Tony Mowbray and spent 3 years on Teesside and played for Walsall, Rotherham, Brighton, and Brentford. Tom, who is your answer?
I have gone with Emmanuel Ledesma.
Okay, Emmanuel Ledesma for Tom. And Matt, who have you gone for?
Yeah, I've went with Ledesma as well. No idea why, just Walsall Ledesma popped into my head, and it was around that time.
Well, I can tell you both Googled the answer because it is correct. It is correct. So for people who were sat in the car and thinking, God, that's a tough question this week, there you go. There's your answer. It's Emmanuel Ledesma, currently playing in Viva Las Vegas. So let's look ahead now to QPR. Well, that 4-1 win feels a long, long time ago now, because QPR were bottom of the table when we beat them 4-1 at Loftus Road, but they're now currently 14th. They were in a really good run of form. They were 8th at one point, but now their form has slowly started to change with 4 defeats in 5. So, predictions. Tom, I'll come to you first. How are you feeling about this game, and what is going to be your prediction?
I'm feeling thoroughly unexcited by this game. I'm just trying to think of ways to kind of like hype myself up to go to the Riverside at the moment. Might go to the famous van before the game on Tuesday. Get some curry and chips or something. But yeah, I'm going to go 1-0 Boro, and it'll be a very boring game. And I'm going to go for Whittaker to get his first Boro goal.
Okay, Whittaker get his first Boro goal in. And Matt, what are you going to go for? And good shot, by the way, Tom, for the van. I'll probably be attending that as well. But go on, Matt, sorry.
Yeah, I'm only going because you're there, mate, to be honest with you. That, and I'm obligated. No, I'm feeling completely apathetic about this one. But I can see us winning, getting our hopes up, only to then probably lose 1-0 at Luton next weekend. So I'm going to say 1-0 Boro in a similar vein to the Derby game. And I'll go with Finnazaz.
Okay, then. And I'll round us off as well. I think we will win this game. I think it'll be really difficult, though. I think it's going to be like 1-1 for a long, long period of time. And we'll just find a way to win it. And hope will be restored. Boro will probably have fixtures that have gone their way. And it'll be 2 points, and everyone will be going, well, we could do it again. And that is when the hope will kill you. I just want it to be the swan song and end the season at some point of it. But I think that's how a lot of people feel at the moment, apathetic and sad and frustrated. And that is just being a Boro fan at this point. You know, they always bring you up to knock you back down again. But guys, thank you very much for joining me as always. To listeners and the viewers, firstly, I want to say thank you for everyone on Spotify as well, because we now have 500 5-star reviews on Spotify. So thank you very much for that. That means a lot to us and the team. And on top of that too, thank you for liking all of our videos. Thank you for subscribing. But if you haven't done any of those things, please do. That helps us get found and charted and all of that kind of fun stuff. But for right now, this has been the Boro Breakdown podcast, and that was all your Boro Match Day chatter in the pod. Thank you so much for listening. I know it's been painful for the last few weeks. Trust me, we feel the pain too. Thanks for now. Cheers.